Good morning. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I'm Suzanne LaRoe, your worship associate for today's service. We wish to acknowledge that we are in the traditional lands of the Shawnee and Manahoic, Mesawomek, and Monacan tribes who lived in this area prior to the arrival of European settlers who took the land for their own. We come together each Sunday morning as a community of seekers, seekers of what is most important in our lives, seekers of understanding in the face of uncertainty and loss, seekers of forgiveness for our shortcomings, seekers of gratitude for the unexpected gifts we gather from all around us. We gather in the awe of the beauty of nature and the mysteries of the universe. But most importantly, we come together as seekers of a community of love, empowerment, celebrating our search for truth and meaning in our daily lives. Now, as Jim and Eleanor come forward to light the chalice, let's all say together here and online the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. And I invite you to join us as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor. We covenant one with another. Now please stand in body or spirit as we sing our opening song from the Gray Hymnal, number 109, As We Come Marching, Marching. And Susan will play the song through once, because I'm not sure how familiar we are with it, and then as she starts it the second time, everybody joins in. That's some spirit. Wow, thank you. Now we'll have the time for all ages.
Good morning, everyone. Today's story is Saturday at the food pantry. Dinner, Mom called. Chili again? Molly asked. They'd had it every day this week, last week too. Yep, Mom said, tastes even better, the spices sink in. Mom ladled the last of the chili into their bowls. We have milk too. Molly grinned. She watched Mom pour milk into the sugar and spices in her cup. Mom shook the milk carton, just a tiny splash, and put it in the refrigerator. Tomorrow we'll get food, Mom said. We're going shopping? Molly's eyes lit up. Chicken and spaghetti and ice cream. Well, sort of. We're going to a food pantry. What's a food pantry? Molly asked. It's a place for people who need food. Mom stood straight, her chin high. Everybody needs help sometimes. Right? We all need a little help sometimes. At bedtime, Mom usually made warm, fancy milk and read a story. Tonight, just a story. Molly tossed and turned, trying to sleep. Her hunger growled. Have you ever felt your belly growl when you're hungry? The next morning, they walked to the food pantry. Why do we need to wait? Molly asked. The pantry isn't open yet, Mom said. It's only open certain hours. Molly pulled paper and crayons out of her backpack and she started drawing. Then she looked up. Look, Mom, there's Caitlin. She's in my class. Hey, Caitlin. Caitlin looked away. Her friend looked away from her. Molly ran over to her. Didn't you hear me? Caitlin looked down. I don't want anybody to know Gran and I need help, she whispered. Oh, Molly walked back to her mom. Was there something wrong with needing help? Molly wanted to go home, but she was hungry. You okay? Mom asked. Why don't you draw me a picture? I love your drawings. The woman in front of them turned, smiling at Molly. An artist. Will you draw one for me, too? Look at all those people in that line. Molly pulled out her crayons again. Maybe drawing a happy picture would cheer her up. Hey, can you draw me a picture, too? Oh, me too. Will you draw me one? Molly ran to Caitlin with paper and crayons in her hands. Help! Everybody wants pictures. I can't draw that fast. Caitlin looked up. Well, okay. Soon, a woman opened the door. Molly and Caitlin each handed her a picture. Thank you. What wonderful gifts. Welcome. Please sign in, said the man at the desk. Mom didn't have to sign her name when they went to the grocery store, Molly thought. But the man smiled at them. Thanks. Grab a cart and stop here when you're done. Lots of good food today. Thanks, Mom said. She smiled, but just a little. Not like when they played in the park. The food pantry was like the little store where they sometimes bought bread and milk. Cans and boxes were on plain metal shelves. Molly ran toward a shelf and picked up a box of sugar cookies. No, Mom said. Then she whispered, the people in charge, they'll want us to take sensible stuff. Mom's face turned pink. Molly's eyes widened. Why did her mom think that? Why were cookies here if you weren't supposed to take them? The woman at the door and the man at the desk had seemed nice. Would they really not want Molly and her mom to have cookies? Molly swallowed tears. She put the cookies back. They would have been good with fancy milk. food in the cart, Mom sighed. Just like Caitlin, Mom looked like she wanted to be invisible, but none of them were doing anything wrong. Everybody needs help sometimes, Molly whispered to her mom. Remember? Mom smiled. You're right. Molly pointed at a sign on a huge bin of fruit. What if somebody wants 2 cantaloupes? The sign says take 1. A lot of people need help, Mom said. They have to make sure they have enough food for everybody who comes here. Molly and Mom put oranges and a cantaloupe into their cart. Mom handed Molly cans of corn, tomatoes, and cling peaches, bags of red beans, pinto beans, and brown rice, a loaf of wheat bread, a box of oatmeal, and a bag of sugar, spaghetti noodles, sauce, and grated cheese, raisins and tuna, and peanut butter, too. Mom reached for a big box of powdered milk. We'll have fancy milk tonight. Remember her mom makes fancy milk with spices and sugar in it? They checked out at the desk. The man pointed to the wall. Oh, Molly ran to Caitlin. Come here, look. Molly's rainbow sparkled. Caitlin's elf grinned. I was in a sad mood, the man said. Your artwork helped me. Thank you. He put their groceries into bags. Then he handed Molly's mom a box of sugar cookies. I saw your little girl looking at these. She can have them if that's okay with you, ma'am. Mom had a funny look, almost like she wanted to cry. She nodded. Thank you. Everybody deserves a treat, the man said. Enjoy. Molly and Mom walked home. They each carried a bulging bag. Molly, she looked around and saw Caitlin and her gran. I didn't know you lived so close, Mom said to Caitlin's gran. How nice, we're neighbors. I keep looking for work. They closed the factory, Mom said. I've been sick, said Caitlin's gran. We got lots of yummy food, Molly said. Did you? Yeah, Caitlin shrugged. I just wish we didn't have to come to a food pantry. Molly said, but everybody needs help sometimes, and we helped. We cheered people up. Caitlin grinned. We did, didn't we? I have an idea. Let's have lunch together, Molly said. Yes, Caitlin agreed. And we have dessert, Molly said. The man at the pantry gave me sugar cookies. There's enough for all of us. Let's eat. And they did. They enjoyed a nice meal together. The end. Now we can sing the children out. Go now in peace. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you. Everywhere, everywhere you may go.
I'd like to introduce our presenter today for the service, Krista Shiflett, who's a friend and comes to our church very often, and is now also willing to be a member of our worship committee. Krista completed her studies at the College of Boiling and Mary, and she is earned a master's degree in education from James Madison. She serves as a coalition executive director for 25 years. She has served, I'm sorry. Krista is a certified trauma professional, a certified trauma-informed, trauma-supportive, and getting relationship right trainer. So she brings a wealth of experience in working with a whole variety of people, and it gives us insights into the reality of other people's lives. So to reflect on this momentarily, to move from poverty to middle class or middle class wealth, an individual must give up relationships for achievement, at least for a period of time. The issue is time. There is not enough time for both. Now I introduce Krista.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Good morning. You all heard me speak before. I never speak from there. Can you hear me through the mic? I want to make sure I'm being recorded. Okay, so we're going to be talking about poverty. Buckle up, folks. I have 180 slides when I normally teach this. It's going to be fast. Robert, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about the difference between generational poverty and we're going to talk about situational poverty. Situational poverty being you lost your job. You suddenly don't have enough money to pay your bills. Generational poverty is that this has happened in your family over at least 2 generations back. Next slide, please. Okay. As we look at this, their definition of poverty, and I should have said, so some of you know I work at RSW, I work in the regional jail a couple of days a week, and I teach this as a class that's 16 weeks long. So they do all sorts of assessments and we do all sorts of things, and one of the things we do is a resource assessment. So I ask them to rate how they feel they are doing in each of those categories. And then we work on developing a plan to help lift them up based on those things. So I'm not going to read to you guys unless you can't see that in the back. But the one that's going to be, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today is the hidden rules. And we don't necessarily think about hidden rules because whatever class you came from, you learn those as part of growing up in that class. As we talk about poverty, and some of you may have grown up in poverty. I did not. My husband grew up in extreme poverty. No running water, no heat. They put wood in a stove, not a wood stove, but in a stove to cook on. And the top floor of the house had burned out, so the windows were broken, stuff was going through the windows. I mean, we're talking about extreme poverty. So I see a lot of these things on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about, this is literally if you are from poverty. One of the things that people from the middle class get wrong about people in poverty is there's a lot of, I will use the word judgment, about like, why do those people have an 80-inch screen TV and they can't afford to pay the rent? A lot of judgment about that. You have all the satellite dishes on the house and you're like, the house is literally going to fall down around your head. Why do you have such a huge TV? So one of the things that matters a lot in this, it's not on that slide, but I will say is personality. So for entertainment, TV is a source of entertainment, and in people, they value people who are entertaining. The favorite in the family is going to be the one who can make you laugh. Being in poverty is very difficult. So they need someone to lift their spirits. Also, obviously on television, it's something that takes your mind off of the present living conditions. The second part of that I will speak to is cars. Frequently, people in poverty have very, very nice cars. Now, if you give that a thought for a minute, they drive into work. What do people see? They see this really nice vehicle, and it looks like you're doing well. You are not going to be invited to that person's home. But from the outside, it's the look of, we are prospering too. So in your head, you want to think, if you ever saw their house, you think, why in the world do they have this vehicle? I can tell you when I went to my husband's house for the first time, and they had 2 brand new trucks, which is what I had seen. He'd come pick me up, we'd go out on dates, I'm in a brand new truck. I pull into this house and I was like, in my head thinking, A, is it safe to go in there, quite honestly? But B, why do you have a truck that looks like that and your house looks like this? Have a different house. But the money just isn't there to do that, so the outward appearance really matters. Food is another one of those things. Did you get enough to eat? It doesn't really matter what they're feeding you, but did you get enough of whatever it was? So the quantity matters more than quality, and they want to make sure people are full. And that book, Karen, that book was great, because it was pick practical things, pick things that will hold out in your belly. And I'm going to tell just a quick story. This was more around substance misuse, but you'll get the idea. Met a young man on the street in Baltimore. You could see the track marks, the blood actively running down his road. This kid was probably 18, and he came up to me, And he said, "Can I ask you something?" And I said, "Yes." And he pointed to a very well-dressed man. He said, "You see that man over there?" And I said, "Mm-hmm." And he said, he dropped a whole bunch of money on the ground. It was very windy. We're in the harbor. He said, "I ran and helped and picked it up, and I gave it to him." And I said, "Can I ask you something?" And the man ignored me, and his wife said, "No." And he said, "Thank you for acknowledging me." And then he went on to say, "I'm not going to ask you for any money." And I said, "Oh, hon, I wouldn't give you any money." And he said, "But me and my friend are hungry. Would you feed us?" And we had a long conversation about feeding in Baltimore, which is a different story. But I took him and his friend, and we went into a Starbucks, and it was literally, "That'll keep longer, this will last, we can use that tomorrow, and just the planning for how do we manage to eat and survive. And poverty is all about surviving. It's how do I get through each day. It's not thinking about the future. You're thinking about, can I eat today? And that the judgment, it comes really fast, like, why didn't you? But they call it in this program that I teach, the tyranny of the moment, the hunger. What do I need the most right now? Well, if I get my cell phone turned off, then nobody's going to be able to call me for work. We can sit here in the dark if we have to. Those kind of decisions. My mother-in-law died because she had to decide whether she took her heart meds or whether she took her insulin. Because back then, Medicaid didn't cover, and she died because she couldn't buy both meds. All right, so style, definitely individual style really matters. Brand names, not so much as, is this your style? And in the present, that's where you live, always, not thinking of the next day. Next slide, please. Let me say something else about money. One of the things and I learned this early with my husband, is if you have a nickel in your pocket, you're going to spend it. Because you don't know if you're going to have tomorrow, and you want that joy and that instant gratification in this minute. So there's not that thought, he still does this, and anyway, but he'll like, I'm going to go in and buy a Coke from the convenience store. Well, you could buy, 5 Cokes if you bought it at the grocery store, but no, it's that, I want it right now, I'm going to spend $2.50 for one bottle. We don't think about those things, but that's how it goes. Frequently, they do not believe that they can change what has happened. Fate's going to make whatever happens, happens. They have no control over their life. I call this living life as a leaf on a creek. They correct me and say it's a leaf living in a tornado, frequently. Yours is too gentle for what happens in their world. Always that love is conditional. You are in if they like you, you're out if they don't. The same thing is if you've ever owned a business and you had people from poverty working for you, they'll work hard for you if they respect you and they like you, and if not, it's not happening. Not happening at all. Not interested. Also to their own detriment, because they will frequently just say, "That's it, I'm done, I quit." Probably a lot of expletives following that, and they just walk off the job. There's no thought for tomorrow. There's no thought for, how am I going to pay the bills tomorrow? I just quit my job, now I've got to find another one. That's not how it works. It's about relationships. It's about who matters and who respects you, and if you disrespect them, done. I had a child, I taught school for a number of years, and at this time I was teaching 4th grade, and I'd read the file on this kid, and they thought he was emotionally disturbed and all this other stuff, and he'd crawl around on the floor and bark like a dog so I put him right up in the front of the room, and it was wonderful for me. I never had any problems. So one day I said to him, "Hey, you know what? I read when you were in 3rd grade, you did those things." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I hated my teacher. She was so mean. I did everything I could to make her life miserable." This is a 9-year-old. He flat just told me. And this family was living in their car. They were selling their kids Adderall to get by. So huge poverty. I never had any problems. He had great grades with me, but it's all about those relationships and building, and I could teach a huge class on that, but we'll go forward from there. You're very much interested in what's happening now, and the last part of that, entertainment, humor is always about people, or it's always about sex. Always. That's the veins they run in. There's always that underdriving current. Everything has a double entendre. But I've sort of talked about the driving forces of what happens. Matriarchal, especially now that we've seen the shift where marriage doesn't have the same importance that it used to have, that frequently these will be single moms living in poverty, making minimum wage, not making a living wage, and the struggle is real. Next slide, please. Class, and this is where we value things. Whoever has the most toys wins. We all kind of know that, right? That you're to manage your money. You think about investing, you think about putting it in bank, it's to go for the long term, you're thinking about putting in for college. Achievement is highly valued in the middle class. Have you gone to college? Are you upwardly mobile? My kid is first in their class. My kid won the 100-yard dash. My kid did this. My kid did that. Achievement matters. Brand names. So my kids went to a private school, and they'd always have a big rummage sale, and tons of people would come to the rummage sale. But this never got driven home to be more than that, because they weren't looking for brand names. So the people who came to this rummage sale weren't interested in brand names. I was interested in brand names, and you could get a 50-gallon garbage bag for $1. And as soon as my shift was over, I was shoving stuff in there, all those brand names things, done. Shoes, same thing. Shoes that had never been worn, that would have been $100 a pair for $1. I'm like, mine. But they didn't care about that kind of stuff. So it was always left. We're always forward-facing in the middle class. Next slide. Obviously, education is valued. We want our kids to go to college, or at least get post-high school education in some form or fashion. We think we can impact what's going on in our lives. Father, at least in national view, and love and acceptance is based on achievement. How well are you doing in the middle class, right? And some of you may have grown up in households where you were in that, and they're like, you're not working hard enough, you're not doing this hard enough, why weren't you first? Why didn't you have an A+ on your test? Whatever it was. Humor is situational, and driving force is work, achieve. Now, I didn't include the slides in here because I've got limited time, but there is one on wealth. There are a couple slides on wealth. And what I will say about wealth is about who you know. That's what they care about. Who can you call on the phone and say, hey, I don't like this, make it stop? High up the chain. But the world is run by the middle class. So in poverty, if you don't understand what matters in the middle class, and you don't learn those hidden rules, you're just doomed. So I teach people these rules. Do not walk out on your job in that minute. I know you're mad. Why would you shoot yourself in the foot? He's going to replace you tomorrow with somebody else. Stick it out so you can at least he'll give you a recommendation if you need it before you go somewhere else, right? But that has to be taught. They don't understand what the middle class is hoping for from them. Now, if they figure that out, lots of times they will advance, and you see people moving up the ladder. But I can tell you, my husband early on would I don't think he ever walked off and quit, but he'd get really mad, like he'd throw stuff on the jobs, and insane behavior, because that's just how they acted. Next slide. All right, I'm gonna just take a couple of these. TV is almost always on. Everybody's talking with the TV on, which is usually on full volume, whether you're in the room or not, and people are talking over each other, everybody trying to be heard, and everybody trying to be funny. Now, where that's a problem is that when you move and you're interacting with classes where it's like, you're interrupting me, in poverty, they don't think that's rude. So when they interrupt here, we think that's rude. And you're like, So I would invite you when that's happening, because just because they're not in poverty now doesn't mean they weren't in poverty at some point in their life, to think, could this person have come from poverty? Or maybe we've got some neurodiversity happening there where we assume something. We'll not jump to conclusions out the window. Characteristics in poverty. My husband's father said to him, you are getting too highfalutin for the family. You need to knock it off. You're too much. That quote that Suzanne read about there's not enough time, there wasn't enough time. He made the choice to split. He made the choice to come and move to the middle and the upper middle class, went to school, did all those things. And he was just like, I don't share things in common with my family anymore. And so that went, you had to make that break. And I've seen many people cry about it in jail, in situations where they're like, you mean I have to leave my family? And I'm like, your family's trying to hold you down. My father-in-law offered my husband a truck if he wouldn't go to college. Stay here, work on the farm, I'll give you a truck, don't go to college. Did not want him because they depend on each other, and my husband was smart and he could fix things and he could do things, so I need you for my survival. If you leave me, who's going to take care of this? You have to think about that. Next slide. All right. Penance and discipline. So you're in trouble. Mom kicks you out because you owe mom you ran $10,000 charge up on mom's credit card. After you've sat out for a while, family relationships are important. Mom's going to have you come back. All is forgiven, and we start again. You did your penance, you got kicked out for a while, now you're coming back, and the same cycle just repeats and repeats and repeats. I've talked about quitting your job. When you're mad, whatever's there, you're going to hear it in stereo. And they're very possessive of people they really like, but they're very possessive of family members. I gave you that demonstration. They don't want you to leave them. Next slide. All right, so formal register would be the register that you would speak in, like giving a talk. Casual register when you're talking to your friends. This just so you can sort of see what they hear. From birth to 4, I always think this is interesting, how many words they hear early on till later, and the affirmations versus the don't. And generally what they say is by the time they get to school, start kindergarten, kids in poverty are 2 years behind kids who don't come from poverty. How do you make up 30 million words in a year? Next slide, please. All right, so this is just so you can sort of see, because I give this presentation for schools. This is what you see with a child in the classroom, he may be coming from poverty. That doesn't do homework, and my husband's huge complaint was whenever he would look at a book, he could only see part of the page. And I never understood that until I took this, where they just can't seem to take it all in. So learning and reading, very difficult, not that you can't, but it just was so much effort. But when I met him, he had read one entire book in his entire life. And my husband's really smart. You know, he's a network engineer, but no. Next slide, please. All right, so this is important when we're dealing with people in poverty. If you grew up in a place where you had to take on the role of a parent as a young person, maybe your parent had mental health challenges or was sick or had substance misuse or whatever was happening with them, and you became the parent, you had 2 voices that you developed. You developed a child voice because you were a child, and you had a parent voice, a negative parent voice. Don't, shouldn't, stop. Or your child voice, which is, you don't love me, you made me, you bought that. And there's not a difference between, there's no adult voice. There's not like, well, maybe we could talk about this, or maybe we could agree to disagree, or what would happen if we did this. None of that. You either need to be told what to do, or you're whining on the other side in these households, if they had to be a parent as a child growing up. Next slide, please. All right, so you can see sort of the rest of those. I gave you an example because I'm running out of real estate here. Next slide, please, Robert. All right, so this is how that in schools, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just so you can sort of see is, how do we help kids develop ways to process information when verbal communication, usually in these households, is 2 or 3 words? How do we help them? Because their brain develops to get that from birth to 3, and that window is closed by the time they get to school and they're 5. So as a school teacher, that really mattered. Head Start that they're trying to get rid of now is going to absolutely demolish these kids if they get rid of Head Start, because they need to be in there. 3 is like the end of the window to try to catch this up. So expect to see more poor outcomes coming. Next slide, please. Okay, here's how they leave poverty. My husband, a mentor or a spouse, shows you a different way. No, you don't get to put the money from your paycheck in your pocket. No, it is going directly into the bank. If that's too much, we're going to put it in a place where you have to drive somewhere. I would put money in a bank in Richmond. We lived here. The only way to get it, there weren't cards in that day, was literally drive to Richmond as a way to keep it from getting spent on stuff that we did not need, right? This is how, but getting that education and somebody to show them the way is what matters. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is some frustrations for people working with people in poverty. You think you solve a problem over here, and it's like an octopus, and it grows another tentacle over here, and you have another problem. You're like, I keep solving problems, and they keep popping up. It's like whack-a-mole, same kind of idea. So we're trying to help educate them and give them the tools to move. We're not trying to save these people. Because the other part of this is what they know, and unless they have great support system coming out, they're not going to leave poverty. They're just not. Money would solve some of their problem, but they are so ingrained in how poverty works that they don't want to leave. It feels safe. We know this, even though this is very, very difficult. I'm safe in this. I know what to expect. Next slide. Okay, so we've sort of talked about this, but they like some of the freedom of speech and the things that you can do in poverty that you couldn't necessarily get away with in the middle class. And then you see other things that might be problematic. And if you're 2 years behind in school, think about that. And you manage to graduate, I'm telling you, in Warren County, they push them through like crazy, and I'm like, oh, you're not doing these people any favors at all. You struggle when you get out, because you really can't read that well. So then you have to find a job where you don't have to be able to read to work. Next slide. There might be one more. Oh, okay. So these are just ways to lift people up. And understand, one of the other key ones I'll say about here is you have to understand what people can't say about people or situations. I encounter this in the jail all the time. And they leave things out when they're trying to tell you stories, which is very confusing, and they don't call people by name because they're afraid they're going to sink people in the soup. So you're trying to sort out what's going on in the story, and everybody is he and she, and there might be 6 or 7 people in the story, and you're like, okay. The second part of it is they always start stories in the middle or at the end, never at the beginning. So then you're like, okay, wait a minute. How did we get to here? It seems like an hard place to start. So trying to get them back to the beginning, help them with goal setting. That's what this program does for me. We lay them out. They do a written plan. If they can't write, I help them. And then understanding that they are in charge. Next slide. I'm almost done here, I think. Okay, and this is how you put them down. Tell me everything, explain everything, not giving them any. Now remember, they have 2 voices, parent or kid. You're either turning them into a child or that you're going to get the pushback from an adult. Treating them as an adult will give them that room, and then making judgments about them and what they value. That is their choice. I offer lots of choices. What would happen if you choose that? What would happen if you chose that? What are you more interested in? Next slide. Okay. So this is how you build relationships that work with them, and insist on, we're not going to do that. I will say in RSW, they do not let people cuss. It's really interesting. And if they do, because it's something they do all the time, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, because they're so used to it. But they're trying to teach them, you know, this is how we speak, not like that. Next slide. So here are the sources, if you all are interested. The Getting Ahead While Getting Out is actually the program that I teach at RSW, and then a framework for understanding poverty by Ruby Payne. She's one of the leading authorities on poverty in the US. And that's all. Thank you guys very much.
One purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and action. We will now gratefully receive an offering to sustain this self-supporting church and its ministries within and beyond our walls. If you are watching online, we hope you will consider making an offering through our webpage, uushenandoah.org. If you are visiting, feel free to let the basket pass. Your presence is our gift.
Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. Nelson Mandela.
Now, as Jim and Eleanor come forward to extinguish the chalice, let us say together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of a commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. We are never complete, we are never finished, and yet we are always yet to be. May we always allow others to be and help and enable each other to grow toward all that we are capable of becoming. Farewell.